You're tuned in to the HR Bandit podcast, your one-way ticket to the latest and craziest in the world of work. In partnership with Timber Media, Podcaster for India Inc. is sponsored by Adrenaline E-Systems Limited.
Hey, welcome to a brand new year and a brand new season of HR Bandit. If this is your first time here, an even bigger welcome from me, Ankita, dialing in bright-eyed and bushy-tailed from a very cold Dublin. If this is you returning, a big hug, and I'm so glad to see you back on our first episode of the year and our best one yet. And what better way to kickstart the year than by predicting the one ahead? Like every year, this is a prediction spot where we talk about what to watch out for in 2023. And today we have for you not 3, not 5, not 7, but 8 predictions of what is in store for you. But before we get into it, Apoorva, how are you doing today?
Hey, Ankita, I'm doing okay. The weather where I'm in California has been really gloomy and wet last few days. But I'm glad I'm on this pod and having a conversation which is not going to be about the weather. So let's get started.
That's rare. We already spoke about the weather. But you know what? Weather aside, this is our predictions pod. And no predictions pod can start without first reviewing how we did last year. So Apoorva, bring out the report card and tell us, how did we do?
So we really want to start by breaking the suspense. Okay. So last year, the pod predicted 6 key trends. One of them being AI impacting the HR function. And we know how that went through the year. That's all we spoke about and read about through most of 2023. The second trend was trauma-informed workplaces. I would say that was probably going to shape as a trend, but didn't as much through the year. Third was firms considering skills over education. And I think the pod was really accurate in predicting that. So that makes it 2. Learning to live with reduced job security. And again, we heard there were so many layoffs that happened through the course of 2023, and it was all but and a lot of it involved people learning to live with reduced job security. The other one was focus on flexibility, with companies allowing teams to decide works best for them. I think this was a trend, but in the reverse direction, with companies really mandating RT, return to office. And yeah, the other trend was metaverse not being a trend anymore, and no surprises there as well. So you had an accuracy rate of 67%, 4 out of 6. That's not bad at all. Now I'm concerned. Like, we have a really high bar to meet with this episode.
Well, I'm not worried. I'm sure we'll do better this year. Today, you and I are going to discuss predict the top trends of 2024. And 12 months from now, we will meet and we will pull out the report card again to see how much we got right. So are you ready?
Yes.
Give me your first one.
So before we get into the predictions, let me tell you a fun fact. In 1924, did you know that horses were still the main means of transportation? It was predicted at the time that they will be extinct by 2024, 100 years from then. Well, scientists at that time thought that due to the lack of need, they will no longer be needed as a mode of transportation, so they will no longer survive. But look at us. I'm so glad we are not using them as means of transportation anymore, but we can still enjoy the beauty of these animals.
I am very glad they're still around.
It does mean that predictions don't always come out right, especially those that were made 100 years ago. But anyway, our track record has been pretty good, and we hope to continue that trend. So my first prediction for 2024 is related to, or is rather called, the employee experience recession. This term found its way in a study conducted by a research and advisory company called Forrester, which predicted that employee experience investments will take a significant hit in 2024, a trend that has been observed in 2023 as well. Now, what exactly is employee experience recession, you'd ask? So we all know employee experience would be defined as efforts organizations place in keeping their employees engaged, motivated, and ensuring an inclusive environment for everyone. So the recession in this area really means that organizations deprioritizing or laying less emphasis on programs that help further employee engagement and motivation. Forrester in its research said that the share of companies funding DEI functions with an endorsed strategy and personnel fell from 33% in 2022 to 27% in 23, and they predict a further drop to 20% by end of 2024. So while it's a trend I don't enjoy talking about, but I think based on what we've seen organizations do to focus on efficiency, really looking at how they can reduce costs, I'm not surprised. And I do feel that unfortunately, this will be one of the things that will continue its way in 2024 as well. What do you think, Ankita?
Yeah, the employee experience recession sounds like a terrible thing. But like you, I'm not surprised. The difficult part about our job and our profession is that a lot of what we do shows results over multiple years. It's very hard to do something today and see the results in 12 months, or even try and pull out the impact of one action over the others. And you know what happens over long terms? People forget how bad things used to be, and especially when we don't have the evidence that goes with it. So I love the idea of us actually doing more experiments and really focusing on measuring outcomes. A lot of our initiatives miss input and output measures. I would love to normalize that. And, take, for example, a project. Like, I have seen input and output measures, but very few people actually really calculate the amount of money spent in creating the solution. And that money could also be in terms of time. So if you're calling a meeting with 10 people in the room, and let's say all of them get paid 5,000 rupees an hour. And if it's an hour-long meeting, we know exactly what the cost of the meeting was. And if you've called 10 such meetings, you know the total cost. And this is just one aspect of the cost of creating the initiative. And so when we see the output, it should be just exactly how a business measures it, right? Your profit is investment, mine is what you've got. And I would love to see this become a trend in 2024, not the recession, but us actually putting numbers against what we do.
Yeah, and I think I quite like that, especially the point of output goals. And like, how many times have we seen goals that talk about we will increase engagement by X%, or we will monitor needle movement and engagement scores, with just an asterisk that says we can't, however, completely attribute success in the form of just needle movement and engagement scores. We will monitor completion of the program and stuff like that. But I think we really need to come out of that mindset and probably take a leap that marketing as a function has taken, where over a period of time, they have developed really good metrics. I remember this article by Gallup in 2023 where they stated that employees who are not engaged, or rather who are actively disengaged, cost the world $8.8 trillion in lost productivity. And I wonder that's how we should start looking at our own metrics. Let's not just talk about engagement. Let's go a step further and talk about how disengagement impacts the bottom line. What's the cost of disengagement, and how our initiatives, if they are improving engagement by 2 basis points, this is how it translates to savings for the company.
Yeah, I really like that. And when we're talking about experiments, I also realize it is very hard to do in your organization, right? Like, we keep comparing our HR profession to marketing because obviously they're way ahead of us in using certain levers like behavioral economics, input and output measures, and so on. But they also have the luxury of being able to do something which is similar to clinical trials. But for us, your A/B testing is possible, but we can't use employees as our test subjects to the extent that we'd really like to, right? Messing things up has a huge cost. So it will be an interesting one to see. But anyway, I'm going to give you my first prediction, Apoorva. So
yeah, go for it.
Surprise. It is that Gen AI will not only continue to dominate the conversation, but will move swiftly into integration with everyday work. Now, Apoorva, I know you thought I had enough of talking about Gen AI this year. But as much as I'll try to ensure Gen AI is not mentioned in every single episode this year, it would be remiss to not mention it today. With Microsoft giving up keyboard real estate to an AI icon, and every tech organization looking to integrate some form of Gen AI, there's going to be a large pressure on the workforce to upskill, regardless of whether HR helps or doesn't. The question is just how much of a role will our profession play in ushering in this change? Will we keep talking about it and be slow to move, or will we really roll up our sleeves and get into action? Now, I have a few ideas on where we can start, but before I share, Apurva, what are some ways that you think we should get a move on?
I think before we even get started on how we can leverage AI, or rather how we can make sure our workforce is trained on AI, we as HR professionals need to be fluent in it. We don't have to be proficient, but we need to have the fluency to really understand what's happening out there. So a few things that I have done through the latter half of 23 that I intend to continue to be able to do that in this year are, number one, there is a lot of information on Gen AI and LLMs out there. So I've found these two really good newsletters that condense all of that information and send me like a daily digest and then a weekly digest. And that really helps me stay updated on the key trends, what's happening, what are some key changes, and makes me a lot more aware of what's happening out there. Second, what I also try and do, and we're of course constrained by the systems and processes of our own organizations, but I also try to think whenever I have a new project or a new problem statement come up, I'm starting to think about how can I leverage LLMs to be able to, one, do that work better and make the end result for my stakeholders better. So for example, if we are talking about building a career development program, which gives people the opportunities to explore different roles within an organization, I'm thinking of if I had an LLM-based solution where people could just, key in, hey, this is the kind of role I'm looking for. Tell me what exists in the industry and in this company. What will that experience look like? So just starting to think through that lens. And thirdly, I'm trying to use a lot more of LLM-enabled chatbots in my non-work related tasks. So that also helps me. So for example, Google, please don't hate me, but I've been using the ChatGPT app a lot more for my searches these days.
Well, we definitely need to upskill ourselves to understanding what it is. I don't think that'll be an app option. I think the sooner we do it, the bigger advantage we have. So 100%, I'm going to subscribe to the newsletters you subscribe to. I have ChatGPT on my phone, but I really haven't used it to the extent I should be. So we definitely need to do that. But I also think we really need to get ahead and think about what are the roles in our organization that are potentially going to be made redundant in the next few years by the introduction of, I'm going to bucket it under the set of modern technology, right? Because I don't think it's just going to be Gen AI. Gen AI is one of them, but a lot of other technologies on the back of it will land at the same time because we're just upgrading our entire stack. So we really need to figure out what are these roles that are going to be made redundant, and how do we ensure that they still stay in the workforce? Like, what do we need to do to ensure that they still contribute to the productivity and the GDP of the entire workforce and the organization? So that's one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum, we really need to figure out when we bring in these people with these new skills, right? For the first thing, we won't get years of experience, right? Like, you can't say we're going to hire people with X years of Gen AI experience, because I don't think that really exists. So we'll have to figure out what are the skills we're hiring for and how much are we paying them, right? There'll be new ranges that'll get into the market. There'll be new job families and so on. And we need to get ahead of the game versus the hires dictating how much we pay them and what we're doing with it. And I think we're probably starting to get a little late in that game. And if we wait too much longer, we'd probably be behind. What do you think?
If I go by the latest layoffs that happened in Instagram, they specifically laid off 60 technical program managers and asked them to consider other opportunities in, say, product management. And I just wonder, of course, we don't know the backstory, but I just wonder, we are starting to see some glimmers of probably AI impacting certain kind of roles. And like you said, we really have to get ahead of the game. I think what Instagram did seems a lot more reactive. I think it should be a clarion call for us as professionals and rest of the organizations to really start doing that more proactively in our own companies.
Agree. Okay, so that's two out of the way. Apurva, give us your next prediction.
Okay. Okay. I don't know why it feels like my predictions are just so gloomy, but my next one is about something that Gallup calls as the manager squeeze, which means the increased expectations of managers that have resulted in lower morale and higher burnout for them. Manager squeeze, according to Gallup, and I tend to agree with them, is set to reach a peak in 2024. Managers are more likely than non-managers to be disengaged at work, burnt out, looking for a new job, and feeling like their organization doesn't care about their well-being, as per a research done by Gallup. It's not surprising. If you look around us, we've seen how due to the role reductions that companies did throughout of 2023 and even the year preceding that to a certain extent, managers now really have a lot more work to do on a tighter budget within their teams. There's also been a great reset with managers, right? There was this entire euphoria when firms were on a hiring spree in 2021 and 2022. Like people were hiring like crazy. They were setting up teams for work they did not even know existed. And that immediately died down towards the end of 22 and continued in 2023. And now we really are asking our managers to do a lot more with less. And their task is a lot more difficult because they also have to convince their teams to do a lot more with less. We've seen a lot of managerial layers spring up during the hiring blitz of 21 and 22, which also meant that many individual contributors with less experience started managing teams. 2023 was also a year when a lot of leaders voiced out openly their concerns with how the managerial layers proliferated, often not in the best of ways. So, for example, you had Elon Musk saying that, oh, there's 10 managers for every one person in Twitter. Or Mark Zuckerberg saying, we don't need managers, managing managers, and so on. So I do think the year has been particularly hard for them, and it will kind of continue the same way in 24 if the initial indicators are to go by. However, I do not completely agree with the extreme opinions of the leaders I just mentioned. I do think managers play a really important role, and we will be remiss to not focus on this problem and make things easier for them in the coming year. So thoughts from you, Ankita?
Well, I'm really glad I'm not a manager. I think,
Make that too.
Yeah, for a few years, I've always wondered, like, is the IC path better than the manager and so on? But I always knew that being a manager was going to be a pain. I love that Gallup has now confirmed it, that it's only going to get worse. So maybe in 2025 and beyond, I'll consider being a manager. But to your point, I don't think this is surprising. I don't think this is new. I think every single year, we've been asking managers to do more that has been historically expected of them. They're the passer downs of bad news. Earlier they just had to get a job done. Now they need to be empathetic. They need to be operationally efficient. They need to be technically adept. They need to, I don't know how many places they need to balance at the same time. And I don't know whether we've done enough to reduce the manager tax. Like, our profession just loves to say, oh, as a manager, your job is to create a succession plan. Oh, as a manager, your job is to sit and promote your employees and do like another 30 things. So yeah, the manager squeeze is real. I agree with the prediction. And I 100% think that we need to do something. But I'm like, what do we do? Like, do you have recommendations on how to tackle the manager squeeze?
I think a couple of things. One is a little more far-fetched in the sense, we are usually a lot more reactive when it comes to looking at org structures, looking at things like, do we have the right org design in place? And the entire problem of firms being excess on managers, I think, came from there. So I think as HR professionals, we have to more closely work with our businesses when they are crafting their business strategy as to, hey, what's your org design strategy? Let me partner with you on that. If you are hiring X number of people, how should those be divided between, say, managers versus ICs, or senior folks versus non-senior folks? Secondly, for managers themselves, like you said, I think there's a lot of onus that we place on managers with our initiatives. And with AI probably coming into the picture, we can leverage solutions a little more to take things off managers' plate and probably automate them. So succession planning, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know what, eventually at some point this year, we might need to do a dedicated episode on just what do we do with managers. But while we're thinking of that, I'm going to give you my second prediction, and it is that, well, my predictions are probably not as gloomy, but my second prediction is that we'll continue to talk about working from an office. Now, as much as I don't want to keep talking about the topics that we did in 2023, in 24, I think we will still be attempting to get people back into the office. We will still face resistance, and we will still be trying to figure out how do we maximize the time spent in office. Almost every single prediction report out there has return to office mentioned in some form or the other. Culture Amp, for example, talks about building commute-worthy experiences. And Gartner says that employees now have a sharper awareness of what they spend to go to work. Now, in 2024, organizations were looking to attract talent. They were trying to figure out the perfect hybrid strategy. But I think now they'll also need to look to tackle the cost of work. And Gallup has two strategies that they've listed. One is by sharing the tangible and intangible cost of returning to the office and finding the total way to reduce the total cost. I think it's a little ambitious, but I think organizations will relook at their benefits that they offer. So what kind of caregiving benefits do they have? Are more dogs coming into the office? What does a financial well-being program look like? What's the commute looking like? But I think pushing to return to the office purely via compliance is short-term thinking. We're still going to be talking about this topic. And I think it'll take a little longer than 2024 to figure out the perfect balance.
I have a slightly different opinion on this one. I feel that the jury is really out on on return to office. And it's been established that hybrid is likely the best way to work. Maybe not 5 days a week. And that's why 2 or 3 days a week you come to office and work from home rest of the week. And I think within the realms of that, companies will probably keep experimenting or keep pushing compliance to employees. So I feel like there's going to be less debate about just coming to office. I think that's a given for 2024. But I do like your point on commute-worthy experiences. Is the cost of someone, and I'm not talking about cost in dollar terms, but just the discomfort of commuting, is the return of investment of the experience I get while being in office more than the effort that I'm spending to commute? I think that's the area which will really make a difference. But unfortunately, I don't think companies are thinking about that right now. I'm yet to hear of any innovative strides being made in this area. If at all, we are hearing about companies cutting down on some of the in-office perks of even lunches or reducing staff in, say, daycares that they have in offices. So I just wonder if this will be a year of rude awakening for employers in this regard, rather than them really coming up with new benefits in 24.
You know what, I actually think 25 will be the year of rude awakening and not 24. But 24 is where we will see the situation get aggravated a little bit. I think there'll be a lot of discussion. Offices, like organizations, will force people to come into the office, and they will take either the compliance route or the FOMO route. But whatever decisions we take will play out in 24, and then we'll see the fallout of it in 25. So eyes glued on this one. We'll see which organization does what. But Apoorva, give us your last one.
All right. The last one is not a gloomy one. I'm talking about and no, I'm not talking about Gen AI. Ankita already spoke about it. I'm talking about Gen Z, also known as digital natives. Um, so before we get into what this trend means, let me give you a quick rundown of what are the different generations. So Gen Z are people born between 1997 to 2012, roughly 11 to 27 years old. Millennials is the generation before that, born between 1981 to 1996. And then we have Gen X, born between 1965 to 1980. And then we have the baby boomers, born between 1946 to 1964. 2024 will see growing numbers of Generation Z or Gen Z entering the workplace, while millennials increasingly move into positions of seniority and management. Why this is a trend for the year is because 24 is going to be the first year where Gen Z will make up a higher percentage of workers than the boomers. We all know that Gen Z are known to be more vocal, they value transparency, want flexibility, look up to their leaders to take a stance on important political, social issues. And it does have its own set of HR implications. So, how do we curate experiences and workplace policies that find favor with employees across multiple generations, especially a generation that is so different from the generation that exists at the higher levels of management? So, think about increased pay transparency.
You know what? I'm also looking at the manager squeeze because the millennials will literally get squeezed in between.
Yeah.
The CEOs take a lot of critical decisions, and I think a lot of CEOs will be Gen X or the baby boomers. We will have a few millennial CEOs, but not that much. So it's really fascinating that the company rule maker is 2 generations apart from our new workforce generation. I'm also really curious about how the millennials take that. Like, millennials are digital natives. Millennials kind of are digital natives. Gen Z are much better than us at that. I think I can reveal that we are millennials on the show. I genuinely think we need to figure out how do we actually give the ability or, take in the parts of democracy that really work and bring it into an organization so that everyone has a say on not the final decision, but a part of what gets done. I think organizations are increasingly listening. I just don't know whether they are interpreting it right. We have more listening systems than we did ever in many organizations. And I think every single report out there that actually talks about what are the predictions and aspirations of our senior management versus what are the predictions and actual on the ground feeling of our workforce, they're still different despite all listening mechanisms. So I think as HR professionals, we really need to get better at translation.
Yeah, I think so. And we really play that role because we are the ones who listen in to the front line to a certain extent and also are closer to our leaders who formulate strategy. So I think our role really becomes important.
Yeah, and I know we'll naturally see it via colored lens of our own generation. And I think we'll need to figure out how do we not do that, which is going to be really interesting. But I know this is a time squeeze, so I'm going to give in my last prediction. Now, this is more of an observation than a prediction. Yes, I'm cheating a little bit, but I've been a part of the HR profession longer than I care to admit and have been a keen observer of what came before. So because of many reasons, including the need for multi-generational studies to demonstrate success, our profession is really bad at making drastic changes until forced by the external environment. We are not path-breaking experimenters, and rarely are we at the forefront of innovation. Usually it is innovation in other fields that lead us to change. For example, our performance management system has been the same for hundreds of years. Well, I don't know whether hundreds, but definitely decades, with minor tweaks. And we talk about the same tweaks decade after decade. Now, sometimes for good reason, right? Like the sphere of impact of decisions like these is large. So my observation is that we're great at making incremental shifts, but we never make a drastic jump. And hence, because of this, 2024 will again be a year of small incremental changes. And of course, if anything earth-shattering does happen, you will hear about it here.
As I reflect on what you're saying, Ankita, I'm looking back at what shook the world of work in HR in the last few years. 2020-21 spent handling the pandemic, and the mental wellness and well-being took center stage. 2022, great resignation. We scrambled to figure out retaining the best talent and hiring. 2023, return to office and layoffs. Like we've been hit with so much of unexpected changes at a really fast pace last few years. So I think it has built a muscle in us to just keep reacting. So I really think we need to zoom out, take a step back, and get back into the mode of thinking more long term. Like I remember a time when Laszlo Bock, who used to be the chief people officer of Google, came up with work rules. I really am waiting for, the next Laszlo Bock who brings up something path breaking in the world of work.
Yeah, this is where I probably have, I'm the Debbie Downer down here, but I don't see our profession building that muscle unless maybe, I don't know, the alpha generation comes into being. So we'll see. We'll see just how many. I think 24 will be a year of us watching. It's also a huge pressure on you and I to suddenly do something earth-shattering, but I don't know. Fingers crossed, something happens. But
yep.
That's my prediction. Those are my three. Now I'm not clairvoyant and I may be wrong on almost all my predictions. I want to bet that I'll be 100% right, but we'll see. I know we'll see a few surprising trends also. But Apoorva, before we get out of here, we've done, in the past, we've always done not a trend. So tell me, what is one thing that will not be a trend in 2024?
I'm going to say something controversial here because this is a topic which has been very close to me last few years, but I really think there's this research by McKinsey, or a report by McKinsey, that talks about DEI continuing to be a big focus area for 2024. But I have a slightly different opinion there. I don't think DEI in its conventional form is going to be a trend moving forward. With the legislative changes specifically in the US, and given a lot of, especially the tech companies have their headquarters here in the US, we are going to see a shift in the conventional way of DEI. And when I say conventional way, just output goals on hiring people from a certain background. And we are already seeing some. So PwC just a few days back announced changes to its hiring strategy and goals for 2024 in keeping with the new legal considerations in the US. So they've made a lot of their programs that were open just for people from certain backgrounds as open to all. And I just wonder if we are going to see a lot more of the same in 24.
Yeah, I think positive discrimination is going to get harder, especially because everyone's raising their voice against, why are the special programs for a certain section of the society? And we're not being able to stand up and justify them, even though I think we should. So I'm hoping you're wrong here. But we'll find out.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my not a trend. Now, Gartner, in its predictions, says that in 2024, 4-day work weeks will go from radical to routine. Now, if this was a pod on what I would like to see in 2024, a 4-day week would probably be on it. However, I'm going to take a bet and I'm going to say this is not happening. Not this year. We'll talk about it. We'll hum and haw. We'll drag our feet. And then maybe in 2025, we'll do something about it. But you know what? Gartner, I don't agree with you.
Yeah, I say +1 to that. I think the 4-day week, firstly, I'm not hearing enough about it as much as we were, say, sometime in early 2023, for example. So it seems to have died a death of its own. And I've also listened to a few podcasts and where there's been very mixed reviews. So it doesn't seem to be the be-all, end-all way of work that it was imagined to be. Because a lot of companies did not reduce the total number of hours with a 4-day work week. They just squeeze the same amount of work in 4 days, which need not work for everyone.
Yeah. Okay. So there you have it. Those are our 8. We'll come back and we'll tell you what was true and what was not. But it's time for us to go. Before I go, I have a quick shout out. A few months ago, in I want to say October. Yes, in October we released an episode on psychometrics with our friends over at Advanced People Strategies. Now, Advanced People Strategies (APS) represents Hogan Assessments in UK and Ireland and are supporting Hogan's current research. Now, this is the largest global project of its kind, and it's looking at the impact of neurodiversity and personality assessments. Now, we've discussed this, but having thorough research and quality data is vital to produce meaningful, unbiased personality assessments. So APS is looking to speak to anyone who has already been diagnosed on a neurodiverse spectrum to take place anonymously in this research. I'm going to leave a link in the show notes. If you want to help the research and support this underrepresented group in the global workforce, please reach out to them. And with that, Apoorva, any closing words?
No, I think the only closing words is that we are very confident that we've made some really cool and accurate predictions for the year. And I can't hope to scratch most of them when we are doing a similar episode a year from now.
Absolutely. And if you think we are right or wrong, tweet us, message us on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. On that note, on behalf of NHRD and Apoorva, this is Ankita, and we are out.
You're tuned in to the HR Bandit podcast, your one-way ticket to the latest and craziest in the world of work. In partnership with Timber Media, podcaster for India Inc., is sponsored by Adrenaline E-Systems Limited.